Locusta of Gaul, ancient Rome, 331 BC. Long before modern forensics, before criminal profiling, this woman became Rome's first documented serial poisoner. She wasn't just a killer, she was a professional. Nobles, politicians, even emperors sought her services. Her specialty? Deadly toxins that mimicked natural illness. Locusta allegedly poisoned Emperor Claudius with mushrooms laced with her signature blend. When his son Britannicus stood in the way of Nero's throne, Locusta was called again. She tested her poisons on slaves until she perfected a formula that killed within minutes. Her victim count? Unknown. But historians believe dozens, possibly hundreds, fell to her concoctions over 2 decades. What's most chilling? She was state-sanctioned. Nero kept her in luxury, protected by imperial guards, rewarded with estates for every successful assassination. When Nero fell, so did Locusta. The new emperor had her executed publicly, but her legacy lived on. She proved that poison was the perfect weapon, silent and undeniable and devastating. Elizabeth Báthory, 1500s Hungary, a countess whose name still haunts Eastern Europe. Born into nobility in 1560, Báthory would become known as the Blood Countess. Her crimes were so horrific that legends still debate what's fact and what's folklore. Between 1590 and 1610, young peasant girls began disappearing from villages near her castle. Servants who entered her estate were never seen again. The truth that emerged was nightmare fuel. Báthory, obsessed with maintaining her youth and beauty, believed bathing in the blood of virgins would keep her skin young. She tortured and murdered an estimated 80 to 650 young women, the exact count lost to history. Her methods? Beatings, burnings, mutilation, freezing victims in winter courtyards, and pouring water over them until they became ice sculptures. What makes her case unique is how she was caught. In 1610, authorities raided her castle after too many girls vanished. They found bodies in various stages of disposal, torture chambers, and evidence of cannibalism. But here's the twist. Because of her noble status, she was never formally tried. Instead, she was walled into her own castle, left to die in a bricked-up room. She lasted 4 years. Was she truly bathing in blood? Or was this aristocratic sadism mixed with medieval superstition? We Jack the Ripper, London, 1888. The name that needs no introduction. In the autumn of 1888, the Whitechapel district of London became a hunting ground. 5 women, all prostitutes working in extreme poverty, were brutally murdered and mutilated in ways that shocked even hardened police officers. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. What made the Ripper different wasn't just the brutality, it was the precision. The killer possessed surgical knowledge, removing organs with skill that suggested medical training. Each murder grew more elaborate, more theatrical. The Ripper taunted police and newspapers with letters, though many were hoaxes. One letter, accompanied by half a human kidney, claimed, "I fried and ate the other half." Despite the largest manhunt in Victorian history, involving hundreds of investigators and countless suspects, the Ripper was never caught. Why does this case still captivate us? Because it represents the birth of modern criminal investigation. Police used photography, forensic evidence, and criminal profiling for the first time. And still failed. The Ripper showed Victorian society that industrialization brought new horrors. In crowded cities with poverty and anonymity, a killer could vanish into the fog. Over 130 years later, with over 100 suspects proposed, we're no closer to knowing his identity. Jack the Ripper remains history's most famous unsolved case. H. Holmes. America, the 1920s. Often called America's first serial killer, though that title is debated. Born Herman Webster Mudgett, Holmes was a con man, bigamist, and killer who turned murder into a business model. During the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, Holmes built what newspapers later called his murder castle, a hotel specifically designed for killing. Soundproof rooms, gas lines to asphyxiate guests, a basement crematorium, acid vats, secret passages. He lured victims with job offers, romance, and promises of lodging. Young women vanished inside those walls. Holmes confessed to 27 murders, but investigators believe the count was much higher, possibly over 200. The World's Fair brought thousands of young people to Chicago with no family ties, no one to report them missing. What's terrifying is how calculated it was. Holmes had a medical degree. He sold skeletons to medical schools. He collected life insurance on his victims. This wasn't passion or compulsion, it was profit. When caught, Holmes showed no remorse. He claimed the devil made him do it, that his face had changed to reflect his evil nature. He was hanged in 1896, but his murder castle influenced every horror story about hotels and trapped victims that came after. The building mysteriously burned down before it could be fully investigated. Holmes proved that American ingenuity could be weaponized, that capitalism and murder could merge, that evil could wear a charming smile and a businessman's suit. Ed Gein. Plainfield, Wisconsin, 1957. Post-war America, where suburban dreams hid dark secrets. Police investigating a missing hardware store owner entered the Gein farmhouse and found a scene from hell. A woman's body hung from the ceiling, gutted like a deer. Furniture upholstered with human skin. Bowls made from skulls. Lampshades of tanned flesh, a belt of nipples, masks made from faces. Ed Gein was a grave robber turned killer. After his domineering mother died in 1945, Gein became obsessed with her memory and with anatomy. He exhumed bodies of middle-aged women who resembled his mother, bringing them home to preserve them. Confirmed murders? Only 2. But his crimes inspired Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs. Gein gave Hollywood its blueprint for the isolated, mother-obsessed killer. What makes Gein historically significant is timing. He shattered the illusion of safe, small-town America. The 1950s were supposed to be innocent, wholesome. Then authorities found a farmhouse full of body parts in the heartland. Gein never stood trial for most of his crimes. Declared legally insane, he spent the rest of his life in mental institutions, dying in 1984. His house was burned down by curious townspeople. But his legacy lives on in every horror movie about rural America hiding terrible secrets. Ted Bundy. The 1970s and 80s were the golden age of serial killers. Experts call it the serial killer epidemic. And at the center of this dark era was this man, charismatic, educated, good-looking. Bundy was everything Americans thought a killer wasn't. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy murdered at least 30 young women across 7 states, though he hinted the number might exceed 100. His victims were college-aged women with long, dark hair parted in the middle. Bundy's method was manipulation. He'd fake injuries, wear a cast, ask women to help him with his car. Once he had them isolated, he'd strike. What made Bundy different was his intelligence. He studied psychology and law. He represented himself in court, cross-examining witnesses. He escaped custody twice, once jumping from a courthouse window, once crawling through a jail ceiling. During his trials, he had groupies. Women sent him love letters. Some believed he was innocent despite overwhelming evidence. Bundy's final confessions, given days before his execution, were chilling. He described returning to corpses, applying makeup, lying beside them. He decapitated at least 12 victims, keeping their heads as trophies. When asked why he killed, Bundy blamed pornography and society. But experts believe he was simply a narcissistic psychopath who saw women as objects. He was executed in Florida's electric chair on January 24, 1989. Outside, crowds celebrated. Inside, Bundy's last words were, "Give my love to my family and friends. Israel Keys." You might think that with DNA evidence, surveillance cameras, and digital tracking, serial killers would be extinct. You'd be wrong. Modern serial killers are just more careful. Keys, active from 2001 to 2012, was a methodical killer who studied previous serial killers to avoid their mistakes. He buried kill kits across the country, weapons, tools, cash, years before using them. He'd fly to distant states, rent cars with cash, kill strangers, and fly home. No connection, no pattern, no motive. Keys admitted to at least 11 murders before his suicide in 2012, but investigators believe there were more. He chose victims randomly, making him nearly impossible to catch through traditional profiling. Then there's the Long Island serial killer, still unidentified. Between 1996 and 2010, at least 10 bodies were found along Ocean Parkway in New York. All victims were sex workers advertising online. The killer likely used burner phones and disposable email accounts. Despite modern technology, this killer remains unknown. A suspect was arrested in 2023, but the investigation continues. The digital age hasn't eliminated serial killers, it's just changed their tactics. They use the internet to find victims. They understand forensics. They know about DNA and digital footprints. And that might be the scariest evolution of all. Killers who study the techniques used to catch them.